If I'm an indie artist and I want you to play my song, what is the best way for me to get that?
There's no one answer, but I would say in terms of do's and don'ts.
This is Chris Hawkins, the Tastemaker Super Radio DJ, who is the voice behind BBC Six Music's early breakfast show. He's set to drop the latest installment of his acclaimed How to DJ podcast, which is out now everywhere you listen to your podcasts. I'm your host, Dan Spencer, and in this episode of the Best Music Podcast, you're going to learn how to approach radio DJs to get your songs on the radio when it's the right time to do it. And we even go into excruciating detail of how to craft the email that you're going to send to pitch to get your song on the air. You're going to understand how radio DJs craft their shows and create curated experiences for you, me, and everyone else who listens to the radio. So let's go ahead, jump in, and learn from Chris Hawkins. Chris, what brings someone to become a BBC radio personality and tastemaker and DJ?
Wow. Straight in with a big one. I was obsessed by radio as a kid. I was fascinated by the one-to-one, the nature of the medium, like the DJs and presenters, the hosts, were talking directly to me. And that obsession as a kid was the start of a journey where I've only ever worked in radio.
What makes you want to connect one-on-one to people? Like, I understand the magic of receiving it. What's the magic about giving that to others?
That's a great question. I suppose that fascination that I had was the idea that someone was talking just to me. And I was fascinated by the way that that was communicated by my favourite radio DJs, and I suppose by listening, that was the start of my 10,000 hours, and something that it may be obvious that I am dancing round answering that because it implies, I think, but by answering the question directly, it implies that I have mastered the art of what I do. All I would say is that I've been doing it for a very long time, and it seems to connect.
Well, I do very much appreciate, the difference between our cultures, the American culture of very easily stepping up to the plate and beating one's chest and proclaiming one's accomplishments and where one's gotten so far. And on the other side of the pond, it is not the same. But to push a little further into that, given perhaps all the qualifiers of not feeling like you have fully mastered or reached the end goal that you want to, can you talk a little bit about what is so fulfilling for you that keeps you going on this journey to mastery?
Yeah, I think that there's something important there. And that is that I think it's like, I guess most jobs, I feel like I'm still learning, and that every day is a school day, and that every day I'm perhaps a day better at doing what I do than I was before. I think that I get to work in the UK for the BBC, and that was always my ambition as a child. Once I realised what I wanted to do at a very young age, I was very driven to work for the BBC, the world's greatest broadcaster. And I wanted to do a national radio show on the BBC. And I wanted to do a music radio show on the BBC, on national radio. And I've been doing that for more than 20 years now. And that feels unreal. It is, I love it more than I've ever loved it. And it is genuinely a pinch yourself every single day that I am given that privilege of being able to deliver a mix of amazing music to an audience who love the music that's played on BBC Radio 6 Music, and I get to share old classics, surprises from older albums, and then the very, very new bands before they're famous. And that's exciting. It's really exciting. I love it so much that I guess in a world of social media, the instant gratification, the sight of WhatsApps, text messages, social media posts pinging in one after another when I play something new and people love it as much as I do. That's an amazing feeling.
Could you talk a little bit about the art of song selection and music curation?
It's not a science. It's not scientific to my mind at all. So the best way I can talk about that is by telling you how I put together my show every day. Okay. So that is done with two producers who equally love music. They love music as much as I do. BBC Six Music is a station that is known as a place of discovery. And it is perhaps, I think, the most important part of my job is the music selection and finding new music to play on a daily basis. So I get sent maybe over 100 songs every week. And I feel like in this privileged position that I'm in, it's my responsibility and, by the way, my desire to listen to every single one of those, because I don't want any one of those to be the one that got away. So the show starts. I'm on air really early. I'm with our audience as they wake up. And for international listeners, and we have a lot of listeners in the States, I'm either, mid-morning, afternoon, drive time, evening host. And the show has to ebb and flow. There have to be moments where genres work together. And then what I love about Six Music is there are genuinely, and this might come as a shock to you in the States, but there are no rules. There's no guidelines. We do not have a guidebook. There are no rules. So we are trusted as DJs to choose the music based on what we believe our audience will love the most. So most of my day, all day, every day, I think this is something that will resonate with you personally, Dan. I think the working week is about rolling your sleeves up and getting stuck in. I DJ at weekends. I get to host amazing events at weekends. But the day job is what brings everything else. So my focus during the week is entirely on the 2.5 hours of radio show that I do every day. And I spend all day making sure that I think the music is right, chopping and changing, putting things in, taking things out, finding something new, being offered premieres of new songs by amazing bands, and then making sure all of the notes that go with each of the songs are right. And then, of course, there's the other more conventional content that you'll be very familiar with on commercial radio in the USA, where we're finding ways to engage with our audience beyond their love of the music. So we're asking them the kind of conventional questions in a twisted form to try and find new ways of them being a part, them sharing their lives with their audience, with the audience that I said their audience there, because I feel like the show that I do, it is nothing without the audience. Right from the top of the show, they are sending in their love for the music. They're sending in their weird thoughts, the dreams that they've had, the dumb stuff that's happened to them, stuff that they just want to share. It's a community.
Chris, would you mind indulging me and give an example of a twisted question?
Okay. I'll pick something from this week. So I've got to work backwards in my mind here and work out how we got to the question that we put to the audience. I'm not sure that I can remember because it got so mangled. The question, it might come to me as I tell you, the question I ended up asking was, where's your face? Okay. So that generated incredible responses from one audience member who was in a Vogue advertising campaign, a guy who, you know what a narrowboat is, right?
No.
Do you know what like a canal boat is?
Describe it for me.
Like a little long boat that goes on a canal.
Like in Venice, like the guy has the pole and he's on that boat.
Kinda.
Okay.
A narrowboat it's people live on them. Okay. It's something I can't I can't decide if it's weird that you don't know, or it's just kind of something so unique to British culture that it's not surprising that you wouldn't know. People go on holidays on canal barges, on canals up and down the UK, and some people live on them. Anyway, a guy got in touch and sent in pictures of him and his family posing for the catalogue for this particular company. It's lost a lot in the translation, that one, because it's super cheesy. It was just laugh out loud funny. That's where his face was. I'm working backwards. I think we got to that from me talking about a friend having his face behind the bar in a pub. So, you have this, in the States, if there's like famous regulars in a bar or in a restaurant, their picture is sometimes, up on the wall. Well, my friend had his picture on the wall behind a particular bar in East London with others. It was pictures of all the people banned from that particular bar. I don't know how we got there, but it was the phrasing of the question that I loved most. It was just off the cuff, on the day, in the moment. Where's your face? And it could be answered any which way. We're a bit off topic here, aren't we, Dan? Sorry.
I don't know. I think that this was pretty cool. I love it. We learned about narrowboats. We learned that people have photos in bars where they're banned from, which is in itself a kind of fame. And yeah, we learned a lot, Chris.
I think, Dan, you're being very generous in saying that you learned anything about narrowboats, because I know that however polite and however American you are, you have no idea what I was talking about.
Oh, no, I've actually lived in France and in England for some time, and I know it. I just didn't know that they were called narrowboats. I just called them like houseboats because I figured that's what it's a house and a boat. I never called them a narrowboat.
That's right. A more on-topic, I suppose, question would be something like, have you ever been hit in the face with a shoe at a gig?
Have you, Chris?
I haven't, but an extraordinary number of listeners to my show, it turns out, have been.
Speaking of picking songs, because that's such a fascinating thing. You say you have hundreds of songs that come your way. Obviously, you have established acts who will send songs out to you to get a premiere and things like that. Without, inundating you with a flood of people who might hear this and then start submitting songs to you on Twitter, like, what if I'm an indie artist and I want you to play my song, what is the best way for me to go about trying to get that to you that's not going to be obnoxious and not turn you and your producers off at first blush?
Yeah, it's a great question again. And there's no one answer, but I would say in terms of do's and don'ts, do make sure that the song link is attached to whatever you're sending. I know. It happens all the time. I wouldn't do it on a social media platform.
Okay.
Because you will know this. Most people start messages, they're short, obviously, on X or on Insta. And they usually start with, sorry for contacting you here, but... Well, you're obviously not that sorry. You also haven't spent very long trying to work out how else you might be able to do it properly. It's the BBC. There are ways to contact the BBC, and it's pretty obvious. So for now, the best way is always by email. And that is via the show pages on the BBC website. And like I say, it's that is basic stuff. Bands, I love hearing from artists and bands directly. That feels like the right connection. Obviously, PRs and pluggers are involved too, and they largely are people that I have a relationship with and can trust. And in some cases, they could send something through, and without even listening to it, I could trust that they were right, that it was something perfect for the show. In terms of the content of any email, as well as remembering to attach a link to the song, make it easy. A few lines. If you're a new band, you don't need... Your bio shouldn't look like your U2. You can't possibly have that much to say that you need to share all of that in your first intro email. So a few lines about the band, the best bits. I personally am not huge on what songs are about. I was poring over an email just this morning from a new band getting in touch for the first time. And obviously, the song's attached, but there was a lot more about what this song was about than there was about the band. I think make it very obvious who you are, where you're from, what perhaps you're aspiring to achieve. I don't think there's any shame in saying that. And I think make tour dates clear. Tour dates they're really useful for seeing where a band's at in terms of the venues that they're playing. I think that's useful information. It's a good gauge of where a band is at in their career. And when it comes to sending the song, send the best song that you have. This is, for me, and this is not me speaking on behalf of any of my immediate colleagues or on behalf of the BBC. But what I would say is that I get this all the time. Hi, Chris. We're a great new band. We listen to your show all the time. And, I think at that point, cite when and what you've heard. And that proves a little bit beyond it being a cut and paste. And I think that this is so frustrating. We've got 15 great new songs. We couldn't decide which one to send you. So can you tell us which one you think is best? What? If in an ideal world, if every day was 100 hours long, that would be fine. I love listening to music. It's my job. And I would love to help bands choose their singles. And sometimes I do. But not from a selection of 15 by a band I have never heard of. So I think just think about it from the DJ's point of view. I think that's really important. You have to take some responsibility. What I would say to any young band is do as much sex and drugs and rock and roll as possible. That is why you have chosen not to follow a conventional career path. Do all the sex and drugs and rock and roll that you can. Because why wouldn't you? But save maybe like 10% of every day to run your business, and your business is the band. And that has never, ever been more the case than now. The music industry landscape has changed absolutely immeasurably. It is very hard for most bands, the majority of bands, to make a living out of streaming. Really hard. Ed Sheeran Taylor Swift, they're doing great, thanks. They're doing really, really brilliantly thanks to streaming. But the majority of bands make nothing from streaming. So live is most important for them because ticket sales and because of merch. And I still believe that airplay is the best way of gaining instant exposure for a new band. So that email that you're sending has to be the best email of your life. It has to be it's your job application. It's got to be so right. Listen to the shows that you think are most suitable to send stuff to. For example, I have nothing against country music. I like country music, but I don't play very much, if any, country music. So if you're an all-out country band, don't send me your stuff. Send it to shows that do play country music. Listen really carefully and for a long time. Bands, I get this. Bands, because I'm sounding a bit negative now, and I don't mean to. This is my absolute passion, and I am trying to help bands by saying, for example, so I get into the studio around 4:45 a.m. and nearly every day there is an email from a band sitting in my inbox. So, Chris, I've just finished in the studio. Yeah, here's the song. What, you've literally finished this 10 minutes ago and you need it to be on the radio now. Yeah. Dude, no one even knows that song is finished apart from you. And fine, if it is if that definitely, by the way, at the end of, let's say, a long night, without elaborating, a long night and at 4:45 a.m., you are definitely, well, in most cases, not going to be the best judge of whether that is the best version of that song that you should be sending out. But more importantly, I think you're the only one that knows that, or ones in a band that know that song is finished and ready to go. What's the plot after that? So the music team at the radio station that I work for, there's a weekly playlist meeting headed up by the music team and producers from each of the shows. And when they like something, and I, as a presenter, I contribute to that meeting by asking my producer to represent certain songs, certain artists, certain bands. And the big discussion is, what is the plot? Where's this band going to be in 6 months? Is this one song that's actually, yeah, we like this, it's good, I can hear something here, but have they got more? And if the answer is no, then it's partly because there's not a great plot in place. I mean, maybe just that band got lucky. But there needs to be a plan. Always have a plan.
I don't think you sound negative at all. I think you sound very realistic, and I think everything you said is so helpful and should be taken to heart by every band out there, because you get people who create one song. There's so many people who say, I'm going to start a band. They make one song, they post it to YouTube, they post it, and then they ghost. They're done. And it's like, you want a radio team to invest in you and your journey and to vouch. Like, Chris, you built this reputation over your career of like, I'm going to show you some good stuff, right? And maybe it is good stuff, but if that person's going to be gone the next week, it's like, why even bother sharing it?
Yeah. You've put that perfectly. It's about longevity,
yes.
And like I said, it's so hard for young bands to get heard. I don't think it's ever been easier to make music. It's never been harder to get heard.
Yeah, and for everyone who's got that song or two songs in the chamber, and you're like ready to just, might feel this anxiety or this excitement about sharing it with everyone, and you start contacting every DJ of every show ever, not listening to it's like, just to hammer one point home that you said, it's like to listen to someone's show enough days that you actually know what is going to work. It's going to take a couple hours. Yeah, totally, absolutely. And actually, it's what's interesting is, and it's clever. This is what I would do. I see occasional likes on
say Insta or on X as the show is on air, and then in my subconscious I'm seeing it like a band, if it's a band, and then down the line I might get an email from them, and I'm like, okay, that was cool. You engaged, and that's a real positive. It on the podcast that I do, it's called How to DJ, and it's a mix of radio DJs and club DJs. And I would, based on all of what I've just said, I ask a similar question to some of the radio DJs that I've spoken to. And these are some of the most successful and biggest names in the UK and beyond. And ask them about curating shows and about how they select bands. And I will say that the answer is pretty similar. But I would urge a listen to check out from all of the guests that I've had on that podcast. Look at the radio guys, and if you want to get music played, listen to what they have to say too, because you're young, Dan, and I know that from what I know about you, you are just, I think by nature you're curious, but also you're hungry to learn and to grow your experience. And you only get that by talking to people who've been there.
Again, the show is How to DJ, available everywhere you get your podcasts. So you also said you DJ as well. This is not just you trying to figure out what ones and twos might mean. You're actually out hitting the streets doing this. So you said you actually do some club dates on weekends and also do this podcast. Could you talk a little bit about both and how it all comes together?
Yeah, I mean, it all knits together as a. I'm going to sound like a. You know what a wanker is, right?
Oh, sure. I do have some idea.
Okay, but the things that I do all knit together pretty neatly. The Daily Show being my priority, and I love it more than I've ever loved it. Doing the show on BBC Radio 6 Music. The podcast is a natural extension of that. It's not a BBC product, but it's hit the ground running. And I've got to speak to some of the biggest radio and club DJs in the world. So DJs from Radio 1 and 2, the biggest commercial stations in the UK, and also some of the biggest club DJs in the world, the superstar DJs like Fatboy Slim, like Carl Cox, like Oakenfold. These are huge global names. And then, I do. I stopped DJing out for a while because when my wife and I tried for a baby for many, many years, and we have an amazing IVF baby.
Congratulations.
Who's still my baby, but she's 13. And I wanted to spend as much time with her as possible. And the life of a DJ, as you will know, it involves a lot of travel, a lot of late nights, a lot of weekends. But since these days she barely speaks to me.
Chris. Chris.
Well, I can't compete with TikTok. So I'm doing a lot more DJing out again now. And so I have a night of my own called Awesome Friends, which started in Manchester. It's a band night, new bands, and I DJ at that. And then I DJ at clubs and a lot of festivals. Over the summer, I did a lot of festivals, and it was wild. It's been brilliant. I had a great night recently. It was a mix of both a band night and me DJing, actually, at a venue called Manchester Academy, an incredible 2,500 capacity venue. A crowd that they were just in the mood for the best night. So I feel like that night, I could do no wrong. And the band were on fire, so it was a perfect storm for me.
What are some things that you've learned by speaking with your peers, with these other amazing DJs, these other people who have refined their taste, learned so much about music? What is that bringing to you?
Okay, so Dan, I'm going to say it again, and this will be, I know, the third time saying this, so this will be one of those moments where I say, you can edit this out, Dan, and then you don't edit it out, okay? Because podcast. Great question. What I've learned is that there is no shortcut to the top. I don't think there's a shortcut. There are exceptions, but even the exceptions have worked hard to get to where they are. That goes for Greg James, hosts one of the biggest shows on UK radio, on BBC Radio 1. He's the breakfast show host. He worked really hard to get where he is from school age. And Fatboy Slim talked to me about doing wedding discos. He was the DJ at weddings. And I think on one occasion a funeral too. And he talks about the importance of that, putting in the ground hours, being badgered by pissed people asking for songs, trying to figure out then how to make those songs flow. Carl Cox talks about starting out at pubs in South London. Oakenfold, the same. And they put the hours in, and then they put a few more hours in, and then they put more hours in, and a few more, and a lot more. And you have to do the prep too. You know, I think for radio, the prep is really important. And I think that most of the club DJs, what I've learned is that the majority think they know what they might play on a given night, and then mostly don't. But they are equipped, thanks to the experience and the hours they put in, they know how to play it. They know how to change up an atmosphere. It's the graft that leads to the best gigs.
And there's only a few things we can do really well, and those things take a lot of time to get good at.
Yes, there are exceptions, eh? You know, some people are.
There's talent. Talent lubricates,
talented.
right? It can speed things up.
Yeah, that's right. But I think for the most part, it's trying to understand what you do and why you do it. Don't assume that you can just walk in and do whatever it is, whether it be a radio show or DJ in a club to 1,000 people or 10,000 people. You know, you need to be, your armory needs to be stacked, and that comes over time.
Whether you're submitting songs to a DJ, whether you are yourself becoming a DJ, whatever you're doing, hear it from Chris, your armory needs to be stacked for you to make things happen. Chris, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, for coming to hang out and chat with me, and to just provide access to you, one of the, premier tastemakers, DJs, music curators in the world. So thank you so much for this access.
Dan, that's high praise. I have one quick question.
Yeah.
Can we do this again sometime?
Chris, we can do this literally anytime you want.
All right, deal. That's my best experience on a podcast ever. Nice one. Genuinely.
Brilliant.